How's it, guys? Yeah, I just wanted to. I've decided to make a couple of little short videos that are going to share a bit of a journey, a story, and it's not to say that um, it'll make sense as we go along. It's not to say that my journey, especially in the early days, was anything profound and worth writing about, but there was a moment in time that is undoubtedly worth writing about. But it's important that I maybe share a couple of stories in the build up to that. So the first thing I wanted to share was a story about when I was about 3.5, 4 years old. My mom and dad were quite involved in badminton. And I used to obviously go sit and watch when they were playing at the club down the road at the hall. Used to love the way the shuttlecock moved, flying, boom, boom, bouncing around all that kind of, well, floating almost through the air. Loved it, loved the sound of it. We used to get to throw them around while we watched, if there was an old one lying around, we would get to chuck it around or try hit it or whatever the case may be. But one particular night, I was in their room for some reason, or maybe they'd asked me to go get something from the room. I can't remember that part. They were all watching TV, and so in the cupboard, I saw this cone, the closed cone in which there are 4 or 5 or whatever shuttlecocks. And I thought, wow, check this. I wonder if I could have this. So I took it through and I said, Mom, Dad, can I have this? So my mom took it and she opened it up and had a look and she said, no, you can't have those. They're brand new. So I said to her, but how do you know that they're new? So then she took it and she showed me on the top of the little apron or the little dress, the little cone. She showed me it was still perfect and all intact. And so she said, when they knew, they're still all intact. But once we've been hitting them around with the rackets and that sort of thing, then little cracks appear and the little dress gets split and cracked and whatever. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. So she said, please go put it back in my cupboard. And off I went. I went to go put it back in the cupboard. But as a little kid, without any training, my first use of rationale, albeit deceitful, I remember clearly, distinctly going, what if I took them out and chewed the edge so that it was broken? Then I would be able to get the shuttlecocks. And so I did. I sat there and I chewed them up. And I took them back to my mom and dad and I said, can I have these ones? And they opened the cone and they looked, and obviously chew marks versus racket marks, normal wear and tear, not quite the same cracks. And yeah, I got a little bit of what for, because I'd wrecked a whole cone of shuttlecocks. And yeah, so that, but what was distinctly hectic is, and it stayed with me all the years and still today, was the first conscious thought process where I was intentionally trying to manipulate and deceive to get what I wanted. And I'm not saying that I'd never just done it subconsciously before, because I had. We'd all thrown tantrums. I want that. We throw little moods and it's all emotion. But that was actual thought, thinking, if I, and then following through with that. So I thought that was quite a profound moment, and it triggered off, and that actually triggered off a way of thinking. Without it was, we all think we're born good. I beg to differ. I beg to differ. Even with my own sons, I spend, especially the early days, years telling them not to lie, not to just take, not to mess or break, but to look after, to respect, to be kind, to be considerate. I don't have to teach them to lie, to be selfish. Don't have to teach them that. It's natural. It comes. It's there. It's part of us. And so anyway, that was part of the early days of my journey. Went through school. Was in primary school. Loudmouth, naughty. Didn't really like talking much in front of like audiences. Didn't like the stage. Really didn't like the stage. In fact, so much so that I remember when we did plays at high school, I would have severe anxiety attacks that night, the night before, and then even in the morning, and then going up to the curtain, whatever, the first curtain, what do they call it? Anyway, the first night, and my mom would have to You know, you've done the rehearsals, you've got people depending on you. You know, there's a whole team that's involved, and you need to go. You'll be okay. You can do it. You need to go. And yeah, with all that anxiety and yeah, I had to go face it, but didn't enjoy it. Wasn't very good at remembering lines because it was just too hectic, way too hectic. I was the first oak to look at the, what's that person that sits just below the stage that gives you your lines when you forget them. I was the first oak that would have, but generally they'd give me parts without any lines, so that was cool. Anyway, so I mean, went through high school and really got up to a lot of nonsense in high school. And I don't really want to go into too much of that detail in this particular first video, but I do want to say that that deceitfulness started to outwork itself in me in a very significant way. And I think it was because I was such a spoiled brat, being the youngest of three brothers. I was more spoilt. There was more leniency. I was in their shadow. They were taking the flack. And yeah, I look at, I'd gone through some stuff with them and whatever. But the point is, I was definitely given to deceitfulness and deceitful pursuits to the point that in matric, and even a little bit before that, I started breaking into people's houses. It was a kick. It was a challenge. It wasn't like I was going, I desperately need food. It wasn't like I was going, I've got nowhere to sleep or no clothes and I'm freezing cold. It was a case of, I wonder what's in their house, and I see they've tried to close their house up. Let me see if I can figure out a way of getting into their house. And that was really the thought process. And I remember years later, a couple of years later, in fact, when I got bust, which I'll tell you about in a little while, even trying to explain to my parents and to people that, but you don't understand, I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was actually just trying to show people that as much as they think they're secure, that I can get in. Therefore, another perpetrator who intends more specific evil would be able to get in. So I was trying to say I'm, like a, what do you call it, like a hacker nowadays, but like a moral hacker, whatever you call them, virtuous hacker, but in terms of houses. Fact is, I did take things though. I did help myself to things. In fact, at my matric final, when I was supposed to be writing maths, I can't remember if we wrote more than one paper, but it was the algebra paper. I remember I knew we could only leave, I think it was an hour or hour and a half, then we could leave. So I literally just sat around, did a little bit, and then was watching my clock. And that was cool because I had a house in mind that I'd gone in before, and I saw a hi-fi, and I thought, cool, hour and a half, cool, pen down, thanks very much. Used that opportunity to go and break into the house. Had some kit with me to carry the hi-fi back, took the hi-fi back, which ultimately led to me getting bust. What had happened was I'd stashed the hi-fi in the base of a chair in one of the bedrooms, and one day my brother had tried to move it, and obviously then realized something's in the base of this thing, and then opened it up and found this hi-fi. My folks obviously then came and challenged me and said, "What the heck?" And then I went down to the police station. My father gave me a choice. He said, "Look," he said, "Andrew," well, my mom and dad, in fact, they said, "Andrew, we could load the stuff in the car. We go to the river, the bridge, just down the road here. We chuck it in the river. Just pretend it never happened. We move on. Or we load it in the car. We drive down to the police station. You carry it and put it on the counter, and you say, I've come to bring this back." And then my dad said to me, "And I'm definitely not going to the river." And so, they took me through the whole process. I had to go through court cases, dragged my parents through court cases for various things. It was housebreaking and various other things, court cases. And then off to the army, and the army was just ducking and diving. Really, it was. I don't really know what the army was about for most people. It was a lot more real. I was ducking and diving all the time, and getting up to all sorts of crap, really just all sorts of crap. And then coming out of school, out of the army. And so through that school army phase, I'd started obviously drugging, drinking a bit, but mostly drugging. I didn't really like alcohol too much. Coming out of the army, started drinking a lot as well, drugging. clubbing and drugging, not really enjoying clubbing, but going to the clubs because of the drugs, and just lots of copious amounts of dacha and other things, but really just copious amounts of dacha. I don't even want to list the stuff I did. It doesn't really matter. It's besides the point. What started happening in that time, though, in that phase when I was just going off the wall, no job, no regard for anything. I worked for a year at some place that my dad had organized me a job, got into Mandrax at that time as well with one of the oaks that worked there. And it was just mayhem. And so I lost that job eventually, told the guy, cheers, I don't want your job or whatever, attitude, cocky little 19 or whatever year old. Didn't get a job. Tried to waited a little bit here and there, but hated it. I became as I was getting older and older and older, I was just becoming just more screwed up, really, to just put it bluntly, screwed up. And so I'm going to get into a little bit more about that in the next video. I think it's over 11 minutes. I don't want to make each video too long. So this is video number 1. So hopefully you intrigued enough to come back and watch video number 2. But if you're not, all good, no worries. It does get better and more relevant as we go along. Anyway, lekker. Have a good evening. All the best, guys.